Daniel Fontaine, welcome to Leadership in a Crisis. You head up the BC Care Association. And this, of course, is a time of tremendous pressure on you, your network, and all the resources that go into providing care for people that we would consider to be the most vulnerable. Give us a little sense of what the landscape looks like right now. How did it hit you? And then what did you do to respond to that?
Well, the landscape right now is obviously we're monitoring very closely the care homes across British Columbia as well as the assisted living sites. So we represent everything from independent living, assisted living, long-term care homes, and home health actually. So everything pretty much that deals with seniors care in the province of British Columbia. And we're right now looking at a situation where we seem to have peaked a little bit. We had a couple of major hits in two care homes, one in the North Shore and one in downtown Vancouver. And then a number of other care homes didn't have so much of like a large outbreak, but a staff person may have been infected or a resident. So, but we're turning the corner a little bit on that. But that's kind of where we're at. I still doing very long days, 12, 13 hours a day, and pretty much 6 to 7 days a week at the moment. In terms of our organization and how it impacted us and how we got hit was really when you look back on it, it feels like it's been a couple of years now since that, but
Hmm.
it really has only been a matter of weeks, which is hard to imagine. But we really were hit when, I think it was the Vancouver Canucks and some of the major sporting events started getting canceled. And we really realized at that point that this is very serious. Like this is going beyond just an influenza outbreak. For us as staff, we realized that it was going to impact not only the care homes, but us as an organization, as the BC Care Providers Association. And we're quite vital to being able to present to government any concerns for the industry, for the sector. So we needed to keep our operations running. So it was literally within a 24-hour period. I pulled a team together. We dropped tools. Everyone was reassigned to no longer do the job that they were doing, and they were told that the world was going to change. And I gathered the whole team together and assigned everybody different jobs. And we packed up our laptops, and at the end of the day, we said goodbye to each other, and we said we may not see each other physically again I said for about 6 months, and everyone was a bit taken aback by that, but it could be that long by the time that our entire team is physically together again. But we've managed over the last few weeks, and I think things have settled down for us.
So, having that rapid response, how did it wind up being able to benefit all of those other members of the association to help them deal with the myriad issues that they had to face?
Yeah. So what we did was I said to our team that our day-to-day operations really had to cease as we knew it. So we have obviously with our board of directors a number of subcommittees, and we had research. We have research team, policy team that was working. We have communications, public affairs. We have about a team of about 13 staff, and they all have their things that they're doing, and they're all doing incredible work. But I said to them, as of today, we're basically reorienting the whole organization. So you may now be tracking and monitoring media affairs for everything COVID. Another group, we work with Safe Care BC. They have about an equivalent number of staff that work in our office, so we kind of co-share an office and some staff. They down tools as well, so we actually met as two teams together in our training center, and they had to figure out how they were going to do online training or augment their online training because they do some of it already. We had to really just, in the span of a day, go from taking what were kind of plans on paper around how you would deal with an emergency. But nobody, I must say, in our organization, even though we had planned to maybe be able to work off site, etc., I don't think anybody had imagined, at least I didn't anyways, a pandemic to the point where it impacted our staff, where we might not see each other for 6 months. So, but everybody was given a new position. We all went home. We all started to learn Zoom and online technology. We immediately implemented a daily meeting for our team. So we had to touch base every day at 4 o'clock, make sure that everybody stayed connected. And we had other team meetings throughout the week that I established immediately so that people could maintain that connectivity even though they were physically in distant spots. It worked quite well, and it's continued to work well over the last few weeks.
One of the things that happens, of course, when we work in an office together is that there is a casual and comfortable interaction. There isn't the formality of even having to set up a Zoom call, let alone mess around with that technology. How has having to shift to an online world affected the easy communication of ideas that is so necessary in this environment?
Well, it's impacted it less than I thought. I must say, Stu, I'm pretty old school on this stuff. I really do believe in the physical office. I believe in people being together and being at the water cooler and exchanging ideas and being able to grab each other and kind of go into a boardroom and talk for an hour. I really, really value that a lot. And I must say, I was quite skeptical going into this. And even when we all grabbed our laptops and went home, I was worried that the creative juices would dry up, that we would not have the ability to have those dialogues, those communications, and that flow of information between each other. I must say that 4 to 5 weeks into this now, I am absolutely both thrilled and surprised at how much communication we're having, how effective the time is that we spend together, and how much more precious we know it is, and it's so much more efficient in the use of time. And I tell you, there's probably a number of my staff that will not want to go back to the office. And I must say that I'm enjoying being connected with my staff in a way that I've never done before. In fact, I'll give you an example. We have our end of day meetings at 4 o'clock now. We're having those every day at the end of the day. And I had staff telling me that they were learning more about the organization and what everyone else was doing as we were distant and far apart than they were when we were all under one roof. So there are things you can learn from this, and that's what I've tried to instill in my team. That look at it as a learning experience. There's some skill sets you're going to learn with this that you would never have been able to do otherwise, just being in the office. And so when we do eventually all physically get back, I think there'll be components of what we have experienced through this pandemic that will live long past a vaccine or a cure.
What I note interesting is your demeanor, your tone of voice suggests that you responded to the shock of this, and there was probably a number of pretty frantic days as you were trying to, get everything sorted out and divvy up responsibilities and then get on top of that. But I sense now that you're saying, okay, I think we've got enough of a pattern here. What do you think that it was about your team that allowed for this reasonably smooth transition from what was to what is?
I really do give credit to the team. I have a very young team, actually. So most of my staff are I believe, under the age of 40. So in fact, many of them are under the age of 30. So they're actually quite used to technology. They're used to things like Slack and using things like Zoom and Skype and all that stuff. They're very familiar, very comfortable with it. So while we didn't maybe use it as much as a tool, it was something that was in their toolbox. But all of us in our team, I mean, even though we may not have been as familiar, and even with myself, I hadn't really used Zoom that much and that type of technology until a few weeks ago. We all knew that there was enough comfort and enough expertise within the team that if one of us didn't know, somebody else could help. And that's exactly what happened. Like everybody within, I would say, once everybody got into their office, their home offices set up, and everybody got into the routine of knowing that they could stay in their pajamas for a little bit longer in the morning, etc. We really it just started working and clicking, and the technology really worked too, which was a surprise because I had heard a lot of things about these Zoom meetings and that type of technology, and my experience with it, at least in the early days, wasn't great. But
Mm-hmm.
boy, I tell you, the struggle we had actually, interestingly, was less so on the technology on Zoom and more on things like the phone. We actually had a tough time with our cell phones in the early days that weren't connecting to other cell phones and that type of technology. But online stuff through the internet was absolutely fantastic. And now, like you said, we're almost in I won't say a comfort zone, but we know how to communicate in different ways than we did before. We're very much in tune to what everybody on the team is doing. Everyone's getting updates, and for the most part, everyone's pretty set in their way right now, and the machine is working back to 100% capacity again.
So when you wind up having this kind of virtual office, you rely quite heavily on people taking on individual responsibility to get their job done because there isn't the same kind of oversight there is that when you're in an office. What do you think this says about your team? Because I'm sure there are some teams who are going, okay, this isn't working out so well because nobody's there and making sure that you're doing this. What does this say about your leadership style? And I know that's hard to address, but more importantly, what does it say about your team?
Well, my philosophy and my leadership style is really very much about ensuring that people have the right projects, that they have, an understanding of what's expected of them, and then they work towards those outcomes. And I've got a very good team of high performers. I very rarely have to go to them and say, "Hey, would you like to do something?" In fact, it's quite the opposite. If they have extra time on their hands, they're very open to letting me know that and willing to take on additional projects. But I think as a leader, as long as your team understands where the ship is going and they understand where the organization's going and what the expectations are from them, and there's an understanding as their leader that I'm expecting these things to be done and to be done on time. If you hire the right people and you have really good, dedicated people, and they believe in your vision, they believe in what you're doing, and they're passionate about it, boy, the rest just kind of falls into place. And that's what's so critical about making sure you hire the right people. Because had I not hired the right people over the last, 5, 6 years, we might be in a very challenging position right now. We wouldn't maybe have that right skill set to be able to be communicating. And as you can imagine, in my world right now, in long-term care in particular, we're literally every hour something's happening. We have to make sure it's like a newsroom. We're constantly monitoring information. Information's changing. We're being shuffled from one meeting to the next. We're getting intelligence and information in real time. And we need to have the ability and the team to be able to cope with that. And if you don't, in my situation, it could have proven to be quite problematic because a lot of the stuff that we're recommending and a lot of the stuff that we're talking with government is being implemented on the front line. So we got to get it right. And very fortunate that I had a good team, very experienced, and they understood what was expected of them as soon as they took that laptop and they went home. And they've just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, we keep hearing about hiring the right person for the job and for the organization that they fit into the culture. And I guess it really gets proven out at times like this that is the approach that we have to take to recruiting the right team members for our organization. Each one is different, but it really does come down to that, and then that relationship of trust that you help to develop. Um, you know, is there anything else that you has stood out for you in this transition period that makes you say, "Wow, did I ever get lucky with the team members that I have?"
I think the thing that stood out for me is the fact that everyone within my team is a professional in one way or another. They have skill sets, they have backgrounds, they have training. And what has been just mind-boggling to me is how when we left that office and I assigned literally 12, 13 people with completely, essentially, in many cases, different jobs. They just weren't doing what they were doing before. I made the commitment to them that we were going to be there for them as an organization. And Stu, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people have been laid off. A lot of people have been let go. And I committed to them as the CEO that I would do whatever it took to keep that team together so that eventually they all come back and that there's a place for them to be at. And we made sure that we would have the funding there and worked closely with my board. And that's another thing too. I'm very fortunate and we had very good board of directors as well, very supportive of the team. But yeah, I was blown away by the fact that people who are doing things on our crew that they weren't trained to do, but they're doing them because they know that the seniors care providers need that. And they're learning some new skills. As they say, you're building the plane kind of as you're flying it. And that's what we've been doing. And I think they're enjoying what they're doing. It's been kind of different being at home, but overall, I've been just incredibly impressed by the team we have.
Well, I think that it's very, very important to keep your team intact because, yes, it may put some financial strain on you, but can you imagine what the strain will be coming out of this if you didn't
Oh,
have this and what is now a hardened team in place to deal with what will be a whole set of new challenges.
Oh, I can't even imagine that. I mean, we are very fortunate that we've got a team with most of them now, even though they're fairly young, have about 3 to 4 years kind of experience under their belt, so they understand the issues, they understand the terminology, they understand the pressures that we're facing, and they get it, like what the care providers are facing on the front line. And our sector is a complex one. It's not a simple one to kind of put your finger on, and they rely so much on us on as a team to be able to do the proper communications, to do the proper research, to do the proper advocacy on their behalf. And they're just, it's, I can't imagine kind of getting out of all this pandemic, and we will in a few months or maybe a little bit longer. We'll be back, hopefully, together again as a team. And I can only imagine how much stronger that team is going to be, knowing that they've gone through this together and they've bonded, even though they're not
Mm-hmm.
physically together. We've become a closer team, which is kind of it just seems odd to say that, but I feel like we're closer now, even though we're not physically together than we were before the office closed down.
Well, I can't help but think it's because you made that commitment to keep the team together. And through these challenging times, when you demonstrate that loyalty to them, I think it changes the culture of the organization. And that what you'll have post this is an even more robust organization that will find that they have a tremendous amount of agility in their own thinking. They'll be innovative, and they'll find new ways of addressing challenges that will clearly emerge.
No, absolutely. And they've also, I think, they've also been empowered too to do things, and even just encourage them to be even more creative than they were before, because we're a pretty creative team. Like I look back on my last 8 years in this role, and I look at the team that we brought on, and just the creativity and the ideas that have come forward from all of them. And now that we're all remote and in different locations, that creativity had to continue. In fact, it was essential for them
Hmm.
to be creative in order to survive. Because if we weren't creative and innovative, I'll give you an example. We have an annual conference that we put on every year in Whistler. It's one of our largest revenue generators for the association. So when we lost that conference, as I indicated earlier, that could mean a loss of jobs for us in an organization. But we made that commitment. I made that commitment. We will figure this out. We will find a way to do it. And my team has been working in the last 3, 4 weeks. And I just got, a report today, an update on it. We're looking at doing a virtual conference. We are
Hmm.
now in the midst of talking to a technology company in Toronto and building an entire seniors care conference in the cloud. And we would never have thought about that like 4 weeks ago, right? And it will generate, by my estimation, probably the same amount, if not a little bit more, funding for the organization. So you've got to be adaptable. You have to be willing to move. You have to be willing to innovate. And if you don't, um, you will go the way of the dodo bird. You just won't be able to survive. So I think we've been able to manage that over the last month or so.
One of the things that I find quite exciting in talking to you right now, Daniel, is that what are we, 5.5 weeks into sort of like the hard lockdown. Uh, there's no tension in your voice at the moment. There's actually enthusiasm about the prospects. Well, that's what leadership is about. It's about saying, okay, I'm not going to let this completely knock me off what our purpose is, and then find new
Hmm.
ways of doing it. And congratulations to you and to your team for finding that path through this, and continued success to you. Thank you very much for having this discussion
Yeah.
with me.
Thank you so much for having me on.